Hey everyone. So I'm Shefali. I'm a senior product designer at SmartRecruiters, and I'm going to talk to you guys about my journey to my full-time position. And I think it's something that will resonate with a lot of you in your Springboard journey. So why freelance? So when I started out, I actually got my degree in cognitive science from Berkeley, and I'd always done design as kind of my secondary track or my side hobby. I would take projects from friends, started off doing things for free, but that's okay, and eventually built up my rates. And I realized I really enjoyed it, but when I graduated, I ran into the very typical, so where's your experience? I didn't have an experience to get a job, and to get experience, you need a job, or you can do freelance, or this was my solution to help bridge that gap. So when I started doing freelance work, what I realized it was a really great opportunity to be exposed to a variety of projects. So I had done design in some capacity, but I hadn't just delved into it. So I got to find out what I liked, what I didn't like, what worked for me, what sorts of companies, etc. And it allowed me to learn and iterate on my skills. And eventually I transitioned to a full-time role. So I'm going to walk you through my journey and provide some guidance along the way. So first of all, what projects should you take on? What I did, basically anything design related to start, I did. I did logos, t-shirts, I even did PowerPoint decks, which were not the most fun, but that's okay. I did things for conferences, I did websites, etc. And what I realized is once I started taking on projects, I was really nervous at first. I was like, who's going to want me to do this? How am I going to get my next project? How does this all work? There's no like how to freelance. I mean, there's maybe some wiki pages and things like that, but it's not something that everyone talks about and is not the most common path, but it's starting to be a very viable option for transitioning into a new career, and especially for new careers, because you very often run into the fact that you might not have quite enough experience to jump into a full-time role. So for projects, once I started taking on projects, for example, I did stuff for a conference. So I did some logos, posters, etc. Someone saw my work and asked me to do book illustrations. It was also cool. I started just exposing myself to my network, meeting with whoever, and I got coffee with a designer once. It turns out he needed contractors to work at his UX firm. Great. He didn't lead with that, but I was just reaching out and learning about different career paths and how people really evolved in design. So I would really encourage you to just actively seek out projects and get started. There's a lot of different ways to do this. There's sites like Upwork, or you can go to hackathons, and there's opportunities that come up that way. But really just letting people know and let your social network know. People do want to help you. They're not going to be like, oh, I don't know. People enjoy helping others. And it could be something as simple like, oh, my friend is working on the startup. He needs a website, can you come and talk for a little bit and do a few hours of work? That could lead to something else. And all of these opportunities tend to keep compounding and leading to more and more. So the next thing is, how do you measure progress? So when you're in school, it's really obvious, like you did a good job, you get an A or a B, something like that. I don't know where the noise is coming from. Okay. But with freelance work, no one is really doing that for you. So what Andre said was really important, that you have to ask feedback. So client feedback is really different from fellow designer feedback. And when you're working with clients and making progress, they'll be like, yes, this is great, this is not great. They might give you feedback that's very business oriented. And even if the project is done, I would really encourage you to show it to your fellow designers, data scientists, be like, would you have done this differently? What do you think? And really iterate on that. And another thing that's really important when you're potentially choosing this path, I don't know what that is being really aware of what your goals are and setting timelines for yourself. And it can be a short-term goal, a long-term goal.
It's okay to do.
Yeah. Like a phone call? Okay. It's like a Zoom meeting where someone jumps in and anyway. So, all right. Okay, I'll keep going. Sorry, totally lost my train of thought. Okay, so measuring progress. So it could be something really simple, like I want to do 2 freelance projects by the end of this month. I want to do 2 projects a month. Or by the end of the year, I want to transition to a full-time role. just have something in mind. Otherwise, you can just keep going and going with projects and no one is going to step and be like, hey, it's time. Or maybe your parents do that. My parents do that sometimes. But no one is really measuring your progress or holding you accountable. Like, you are really in charge of your own career path. So it's really important that you reflect on that and are very self-aware about what you want out of your journey. So I would encourage you to set up a personal timeline and goals, and don't be intimidated by this. If you say, I want to do 4 projects a month, that's awesome. And if you work towards that and you end up thinking that like maybe 2 is a better cadence, this is way too much, you can adjust it. Goals are adjustable. But when you have something to work towards, you can start measuring something, working, and kind of reflecting on how that's going and really iterating and figuring out what works best for you. And the third thing I want to talk about is remembering your worth. So when you are doing freelance work, there's a very specific implication with this specific emoji, is your rates. So that's something that's really intimidating starting out, negotiating, kind of rallying for yourself. And especially when you're starting in a new career, it's like, I just learned this. Can I charge for it already? How much should I charge for it? And you can look at different online sources or ask around. There's definitely a baseline for all of this, so don't be scared about that. And I would encourage you to, at some point, start raising your rates, because every time you do a project, you're learning more, you're gaining more knowledge, and now you're worth more, right? When you change a job, you ask for more money generally, right? You're learning more and you iterate on that. You probably wouldn't ask for a huge increase with every project, like you might for a job, but maybe like 2% or like $10 more an hour, etc. I would encourage you to do that. And on the more big picture side of this, sometimes when you're doing contract work, it can definitely get hard. There might be a month where you don't have any projects. And you're like, oh shoot, now what? Like my 2-month contract ended. I don't know what to do. And in those times, what I did a lot is I would go back. I would dive into different design books, re-engage with the community, etc. And then just to talk a little bit about my journey, once I started doing freelance work, I got this portfolio, built it up more and more, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to apply to full-time. And I got pretty far along in interviews, and then I would get cut off towards the end. I would get flown out, meet the design team, this is awesome, everything, but I was getting cut off again. You don't have quite enough experience. So I would build, interview, didn't work out, build again. And what I realized is I really needed to learn even more and invest in myself more. And what I did a 12-week immersive course at Tradecraft, which is an in-person program. And that really allowed me to bridge my skills gap. And the only way I realized that skills gap is by doing projects and interviewing and realizing all of that. And once I finally bridged that, I was able to transition to full-time. And I think remembering your worth is important once you get to that full-time position too, because it's not, once you start a full-time role, I definitely still felt a bit of imposter syndrome because freelance isn't the most typical path. I thought someone would find out, like, I'm not a real designer, I don't know how this worked, like, how is she here? But that's not true. Like, just because your career path is not typical doesn't mean it's not valid in any sense. Like, you still got all the skills, you know a lot, you have a lot to offer the company. And that's really important to keep in mind once you reach that maybe final goal that you have in mind, and you can readjust. And I went on a bit of a tangent, but for worth, it's really important to reflect and raise your rate per project. So as you're learning, you're constantly investing in yourself and growing all this knowledge. And remember to do that and really be your own advocate. If you do freelance work and contract, you are your own employer in some sense. So you have to keep that in mind, look out for yourself, and definitely also engage in your mentors. Reach out to them, see what they think, ask them for feedback, etc. So I want to leave you with these 3 points that I mentioned. So really invest in yourself, actively seek out projects to get started. So just ask anyone, reach out to your social networks, look online. There's a lot of opportunities. Obviously, if you really don't like doing a project, don't take it for the sake of it. It should be related to what you like. But try it out. You might like something, you might like an industry that you thought you might not otherwise, just by trying it out. And I think that's kind of the beauty with freelance work, is you're not committed to it necessarily for a long time, because I think starting full-time is really intimidating, especially in a new career where you're like, do I really like, I know I really like data science, but do I like this industry? So maybe try out a few different ones, and then when you're ready to transition, you'll know which one you want to go into. And set up your personal timeline and goals. This is really important, just to keep everything in context. And so you know what you're working towards. And during those times where maybe you don't have a lot of projects, just remember that this is what you're working towards. I know at some point, I think I went like a month and a half without a project, and I had gotten an offer for an entry-level sales job. And I was like, oh, I would start getting a salary, but do I really want to do this? Is this working towards my goal, or is it just delaying the achievement of that goal? So sometimes you have to be strategic with what things you accept and don't accept. And then the last one, which is more tactical, is reflect and raise your rate per project, because you're growing, investing in yourself, you're learning a lot along the way, and it's really important that you're a strong advocate for yourself. So thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.
Thank you, Shefali. Cool. And our last speaker is Dave Crushore. He's been a data science mentor with us for a few years now. He's also the director of finance analytics at Pandora. He specializes in forecasting, analytics, and also dad jokes. Fun fact, Dave actually hired one of his mentees to join his team at Pandora. So today he'll be sharing some advice about how to think about building your personal brand.